How's it going, guys? We're back working on the Z again this week, and this week we're doing the timing belt. So obviously this is not in the car, this is going to be out of the car, so there's going to be a slight little difference between what I do and between what you're going to have to do if your engine's in the car. But you should still understand the main basic concepts of doing a timing belt. So basically, if you have this in the car, the first thing you're going to need to do is kind of get a lot of stuff out of the way. So you're going to want to go ahead and take off the upper coolant and lower coolant hose here, the fan and fan clutch. Those are just bolted onto the front here. You can reach around with the 10mm and get them off. It is very tight, I will admit, but you should be able to get it out if you have the stock fan shroud and everything. The front of the fan shroud that fits right here should be able to come up with the fan clutch. It is a tight fit, I will say that. And then obviously I have my belts off now. And then the only other thing that is different here is I took my harmonic balancer off because, as you can see, I have this long rod here. This is a crank holder tool that I actually made, and I have available for you guys on the zgarage.net if you need one. This is going to help us crank the main crank bolt. Sorry, crack the main crank bolt. We're going to need to get it off. This thing is about 150 foot-pounds if I remember correctly, and it is pretty tough to get it off, especially if you have an automatic. So in a manual car, and what I've done on previous jobs is put the car in gear, because that kind of locks the wheels. And so as long as your car is on the ground and you put it in like a gear like 5th or something, you need to move this a whole lot to move the rear, or the whole car would need to move a lot in order for this to spin. So by keeping it in gear, you should be able to go ahead and crack it off pretty easily. But automatic cars is very, very difficult to lock this in place. So I have this long rod here. There is a little 1/2-inch drive at the end. I don't know how helpful that is, because this is made out of aluminum. So I don't know. I just put it there for fun. But of course, there's a nice little hand grip right here that you can wrap your hand around. And then of course it is flimsy, guys, in this direction. But this is not the direction we're going to be, pulling it in. It's going to be linear, so it is actually very strong. I've already cracked mine off with this just to make sure it works well. So that's just how it is, guys. Let's go ahead. The first thing that I'm going to go ahead and do, I've cracked this, but we're going to go ahead and take this off, and we're also going to take off the water pump pulley here. We need to get both those out of the way, and then this is a great time to also do your thermostat as well. And then this hose right here, this wraps around the back, right up to there. That's the water bypass hose or something like that. And now is also a really good time to do that as well, just because it is behind the timing belt, and getting that off is kind of a pain. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those two pulleys off, get to the hose out here, and then we can take off these covers, just a bunch of 10 mils around the outside, like that. And then we should be able to go ahead and get the timing belt ready to pull. It's really a straightforward process. You just want to make sure you do it right. The Z31 VG30 is a interference engine, which means if you do it wrong, you're going to go ahead and bend some valves, which we definitely don't want to do. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at some parts real quick. Got this nice box in from Rock Auto. So this right here is my timing belt. This is a Gates racing belt. That is the part number. I think this is like 2 to 3 times more expensive than a standard Gates belt. The coolest part about it is that it's blue, but it is a higher performance model. And since I'm going for higher horsepower on this build, we're going to want something a little bit stronger, which is why I went for this. But if you have a stock engine, a stock Gates belt will do just fine. This is a tensioner pulley. It might be a little bit difficult to see. It's actually the one right here on the side there. This is just something, it's a bearing that wears out eventually, so time is just going to not be a friend. If your car's making a really weird scratching sound while it's running, it could actually be this if it hasn't been replaced in a while. So you always just want to replace these. I have a crank seal right here, so this is for the main crankshaft. I've done cam seals on this before, which is why I'm not doing them, but now would be a great time to do those as well. And then last, this is a water pump. And I'm going to leave it right there. But we just want to make sure that we have the best cooling and no corrosion in our system. So pulling off the pump and replacing it, we'll just make sure that we'll be all good with that. For any of this stuff, guys, Gates is a really, really good brand. I highly recommend them. I've never had any issues or seen any issues with anybody using Gates stuff. My component kit here, this tensioner is obviously a Daco, which is also a very good brand. And then I don't know if this has the name on it, but anything that is an MHALE male, or what is the other brand? Stone Ashita, one of those two. I believe those are the OEM component manufacturers. So if you see any of these brands, they're going to be really good. Definitely, guys, on timing stuff, you want to make sure you don't cheap out too much, because this is kind of important stuff for your car. So I'm going to go ahead and pull all that stuff off, and we'll go ahead and look at the timing belt. Alright guys, so I got the water pump pulley off, pretty easy, and then I moved down to here. Obviously I got the bolt out, it's right over there. It is a 22mm in case you're curious, and now we need to get the rest of the harmonic balancer off. So this is going to require a crank puller or a steering wheel puller. You can see this is the one I have. It's a steering wheel puller and crankshaft pulley puller. And then you're going to go ahead and need some bolts that correspond to the length of this. And these are M6 by 1.0 bolts. So you can see I've got some and either of these. And now when I crank this over, what it's going to do is it's going to push on the crankshaft itself and pull off the harmonic balancer. So by doing this, let's see if I can do it in real time for you guys. You may be able to see the balancer is actually being pulled off, and it gets looser as you go, of course, and eventually it'll just fall off, so be careful, don't put your foot underneath it or something. And we can wiggle it, and there we go, we got the harmonic balancer off. So now it's good, we can leave that there for now. So now all we need to do is pull this hose here and then undo all of these, and we can go ahead and expose the timing belt. Alright guys, as you can see we have the timing covers off here. The only thing that I would really note is on the lower cover, on the right side here, there is one bolt that's actually attached to the cover. So you can't take it off without, you can't take that bolt out from the cover, or at least mine is stuck the way it is. I think it's a standoff, but that one actually goes into the water pump right here. So it's a water pump bolt. But regardless, you can see we got them off. Here is the timing belt. So let's go ahead and just look over it real quick. You can see it is obviously worn, but not bad. You know, if we flip it over like this and look on the bottom, you can see there's no cracks, no major cracks at least, and it is still looking really good. The edges are looking really nice. If we take a look at where it's centered on the cam gear, there's a little bit of teeth on the back behind it and in front of it, so it's pretty close to being centered between those two. So overall it is looking really good. Alright guys, so when I go ahead and start taking something apart, just good rule of thumb, common practice, is to make sure everything looks a certain way, or to figure out why things look a certain way. So for this, it's specifically important to look down here at the bottom. So there is a plate, see if I can slide it off here, on the crank, and it looks like this. You can see it's concave, right? Or I guess to one side. Obviously on the back you can see that's been touching the splines, but some of these you can't really tell. And then behind this, there's actually another plate back here as well. And it is also slightly concave. Now, you gotta ask yourself, why are these like this, and make sure to put it back the correct direction if it's supposed to be like that. These actually serve a very important purpose of centering the belt. So if I took this, you know, if I'm the belt and I'm trying to wander, I'm gonna touch the edge of this and then slip back inwards. Same thing with the back piece. So a lot of people, they will put these on backwards, and then they'll see their belt getting pushed to the back of this or something. You just want to make sure that these plates specifically are correct, and then also just look at everything and see how it is actually aligned. Make sure it's proper, and just make sure to put it back the same way if it was working properly in the first place. So these are a very important piece. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is remove this front piece here. We can leave everything else on. And we're probably also going to go ahead and douse this with a little bit of PB Blaster. This crank sprocket here actually slips off the snout. There is a woodruff key right there, and so this thing is cylindrical on the inside. It is on a cylindrical shaft, and the thing that's holding in place is the woodruff key. So we're going to go ahead and spray this with PB Blaster because we want to remove this so we can go ahead and do the crank seal, which is behind here. But before we do that, let's go ahead and look at our timing marks. So if I come down here, you can see right there, I've already marked it with some red paint previously, but there's a dot in the pulley. That is going to be our TDC. So TDC stands for top dead center. That means piston 1 is all the way at the very, very top of its reach, and it's about to go back down. So we're going to go ahead, look at that right there. Same thing on these. I've marked them See if I can get a good view for you guys. I've marked them in red already, but you can see when that tooth, sorry, has a little tiny mark on it, despite the red. So what we're gonna do is look down here again, and you can see right there is a little notch in, I think this is the oil pump actually. There's a notch right there, and then up on here, there's actually little divots in the rear covers. Obviously I've done this before, so they're all marked in red. Yours probably will not look like that, but they all should have physical indentations on them. These are right there, and then this one is down here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is line the entire engine up to TDC, top dead center. So if you guys remember a 4-stroke engine, the piston moves twice for every revolution of, or sorry, the crankshaft moves twice for every fire cycle of a piston. So you can see this is really close to being to TDC, but these cam gears are almost on the opposite side. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to rotate this, we're going to put the bolt back in, put our 22 back on here, and spin the engine over. And we're going to go ahead and we can see when this reaches here, these are going to be on the complete opposite side of where they should be. We're going to do a full another revolution, and then they should be all the way back up to right there. So I'm going to go ahead and get the bolt real quick, and we'll go ahead and spin this over and get it to TDC. Alright guys, so what I've gone ahead and done is taken a 1 1/16 or 1/32, it's a 1/16 socket, and put it over here, and then put the bolt through it and tighten it down. The reason that I did that is because we're going to go ahead and use this to spin it over now, and we want to go ahead and line up the mark, I don't know where it is down there, and then make sure that these cams line up over here. The reason that I put a socket here is because I really don't like bottoming out the bolt in order to spin it over. If you don't have anything there, the threads will just keep going until it hits the back of the bore. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's not threaded all the way back because you physically can't thread every single last piece in a blind hole. And so you can actually cause damage to your threads. If you're getting a new bolt, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I'm going to go ahead and reuse this one. I've never seen any issues with reusing them before. Obviously, if you want to do it right, get a new one of those, and then we'll actually get a new one of these studs as well. But we'll go over that in just a little bit here. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this over so you guys can see it's pretty easy right now. And then right here, it actually gets pretty hard. Alright, a little easier and then a little hard. I don't know if you guys can hear. Maybe not. There's a little bit of hissing, and that hissing is actually the engine compressing. So the cylinder's going up, the valves are closed, and it's compressing. And so you can tell your engine is in good health by how much it is resisting you pushing it down. So as we get closer to TDC here, TDC is at the top of a compression stroke. So you can see we're pretty close. We're a little bit, we need to go a little further, but you want to be careful not to go too far past it. So I'm going to go ahead and be very careful as I spin this just a little bit more. That's pretty close. We want to minimize the amount of time that we spin this in the counterclockwise direction. Not that it's necessarily bad for your engine. It's going to happen just a little bit when you're doing this, but you want to make sure you don't accidentally spin a bearing on accident. So bearings, if you know anything about them, they're keyed, and so they resist spinning in the normal direction of spin, but they can actually spin backwards pretty easily. So try to keep it from going backwards at all. And now we have the issue that if we want to go ahead and remove the crank bolt, it is a tightened bolt. This is pretty tight. Getting it through those compression strokes actually tightened it down. I would say, if I had to guess, probably around somewhere 40 foot-pounds worth of torque. So it's still pretty tight, even though it is just kind of tightened in there and spun over. So my recommendation for you guys is twofold. One, never use an impact wrench on your cams. Never, for tightening, for loosening, anything. The reason that I say that is because they are made out of hardened steel. And hardened steel, even though it's very hard, is very brittle. It's a trade-off between ductile and brittle, and the harder you go, the more brittle you are. And so what I've seen a lot on the Facebook groups is people who have used impact guns to take these off or to put them back on. And what you end up doing is cracking the actual camshaft. Tiny little cracks, and either you break it when you tighten it back on, or as it's running, just the harmonics and stress that you're putting on the camshaft will actually snap the front of it off. And
two things happen when you do that. One, you obviously broke your cam, and then two, because it's an interference engine, you now just ruined that whole bank. You most likely ruined that whole bank of valves. You may need a new head, probably new pistons, and possibly a whole new block depending on how much damage actually happened to it. So we need to be very careful with the cams specifically. That being said, I have used an impact on the crank before, mainly to get it off. I don't know if there's a massive difference between tightening and loosening with an impact. You know, just logically I would think that loosening is a little bit less stress on it because you're not tightening it down and causing those vibrations to really, you know, go through the whole piece of metal. But it's very difficult still. So all of this to say, I need to get this off in order to get this crank sprocket off. So I have two options. One, I can put this guy on it, you know, set it somewhere like right here, and then get a hammer and just kind of do small taps on it so I can break the tension in here without moving the crank sprockets. Two would be to hold probably this cam gear with some sort of, you know, put something in here and hold it. That way the belt here will keep this from spinning. And then option three would be to take the belt off, loosen this guy up, take the whole belt off, and then hold this gear somehow. I don't really have a great way of doing that. But that would ensure that only the crank was moving, not the cams. Specifically at TDC, like I was saying, it's at the peak of a compression, and so it kind of wants to go forward or backwards. Specifically this cam, if you take this off, you want to be very careful that this cam doesn't slip forwards or backwards. It is right compressing a spring, and it really doesn't want to move. So, takeaways, we're going to minimize spinning it backwards, and we're going to be very careful not to cause too many vibrations to go through the crank because we really don't want it to shatter. So I'm going to go ahead and get a hammer. I'm going to try tapping this first, see if I can get any progress on here without spinning it backwards too much. And then if that doesn't work, I will break out an impact just to loosen it up. We don't want to go ahead and tighten it, but hopefully that should be all good. So I'm going to see if I can get this off. I'll let you guys know what happens. Alright guys, I was able to go ahead and get it off just by using a hammer to tap the end of it. I went ahead, loosened it, and then went ahead and tightened it again just so I could get back to TDC, and then one more tap of the hammer and it came out just easily enough. And then what I've gone ahead and done is loosen the tensioner. So you can see there's a 14mm nut on it, and then there's also an Allen key hole right here. This is for a 5mm Allen key. What you do is you go ahead and loosen the nut, and then you use the Allen key to actually physically move the tensioner. So it's offset, as you can see, and so as it goes this direction, it tensions, and it goes this direction, it loosens. So I've gone ahead and loosened it, and then tightened the nut back down. That way, you can see there's a lot of, you know, flex in all of this. So now that we're like that, we should be able to go ahead and start slipping the belt off. I usually just kind of go around, try to pull it a little at a time because it doesn't necessarily like to slip off all at once, and we want to make sure we don't jolt anything with too much looseness. Oops, sorry, you guys probably can't see a lot of this. And this is probably also easier with two hands. So you can see, got it off there. Good, our cams didn't move at all, and we can pull this out from underneath. Perfect. So here's our old belt. Drop that on the ground there. Now, if you were just doing a standard belt replacement, you go ahead and put the new belt on and call it a day. Obviously torquing everything properly. But I need to go ahead and remove this gear here because I want to replace the crankshaft seal. So what you want to do is be very careful here when you're doing this. This piece back here, the piece that's stamped with the Nissan logo, that's your oil pump. And you would obviously be inclined to go ahead and stick a screwdriver back behind here and just twist to pop this off. And you know, I'm inclined to do that too, but you can actually go ahead and put a hole or crack your oil pump if you do that. So you want to be very careful. We're not going to do that. What a lot of people end up doing is their sprocket here gets seized onto the shaft, and they do one of two methods. One is they drill and tap holes into it and then use a puller like this to pull it off, or you can drill two smaller holes in a line over here and two smaller holes in a line over here, and then actually hit it with a hammer until it cracks. This is also a kind of a hardened steel, and by giving it a nice line to crack upon, you can actually get it to split decently easy. Again, with both of these methods, you want to be very careful. One, you don't want to drill too far into here, and then two, the crankshaft actually expands. I'll show you when we get this off. It's into a larger flat piece back here. So if you drill too far, you'll touch your crankshaft. That can mess up the mating surface. Ask me how I know. I accidentally did that on my friend's. So I bought a whole new crank for him. That was quite an adventure. So we're going to be very careful getting this off. The last time I did my timing belt, this actually slipped off decently easy. So fingers crossed we can do that. You can also buy new ones of these from Nissan. You can buy new of these studs, which is a good idea to do. I have not bought a new stud for mine. It looks in decent shape still. But sometimes you'll go ahead and torque it down and then just rip the front of the threads off. Or maybe somebody was just going a little bit too hard when I saw that. But either way, you don't want the stud breaking, and you can go ahead and buy a new one of these. You can buy a new one of those bolts that goes in here. Nissan still carries pretty much all of this in stock, because this engine came in so many Nissans. It came in Pathfinders, it came in Xteras, it came in Maximas, it came in, you know, Zs, obviously multiple years of Zs. So they still carry so much of this in stock. If you need a new one, go to nissanpartsteel.com, find the part number. You can either buy it through them. They're usually pretty dang cheap. Or just search up the part number online, find it on eBay, something like that. You can find OEM Nissan stuff really easily. So I'm going to go ahead and see what it takes to get this guy off here. And then I'll also go ahead and take off this tensioner. You can tell a tensioner is bad by if you spin it, if it makes a lot of noise. This one does not make any noise. This is still in good condition. Obviously, I was not planning on, I was not planning on replacing this, but I figured while I was in here, it is an additional $20 or something to replace, and it's pretty much free in terms of time, because I'm already doing everything that I would need to replace it. So I'm going to take this off. There's a spring behind it. You can see it sits on that little perch right there. It's going to spin a full revolution, one or two full revolutions, and then come off. So don't be scared when it starts spinning around when you loosen this nut up. But just make sure when we put it back on, we're going to go ahead and crank it down until it is pre-tensioned properly. Alright guys, so went ahead, got the tensioner off, and I cleaned up the crank snout around here, and it is actually looking pretty good. I do actually think that I replaced this seal back when I did the other two, the cam seals. So I am still on the fence about whether or not to do it again, but just in case you guys are curious, the best ways that I found to do it are a mix of these guys. If you can see them, these are what you use to open paint cans. So they have a nice little hook on the back here, and it's really nice to be able to kind of get back underneath and then pull forward, as well as just some standard like curved picks. So I have the seal. I'm probably going to go ahead and do it. Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot. I took the crank sprocket off, came off actually pretty easy for me. I was able to see that it was shifting back and forth just slightly, and then pull out the woodruff key. It's right here. Looks like a little boat. Put that in there with them, and then just slowly rotate it back and forth all the way off. Like I said, mine has actually come off really easily. Most don't. So I would plan on ordering a new one just in case you need to drill the other one off or whatever. But like I was saying, you can see the crank does come up into this lip right here, so you want to be very careful if you are going to drill it off, not to go too far and hit that surface. So yeah, I think this is looking pretty good. I'm probably going to go ahead and remove the water pump now. It is just bolts all around it, nothing too crazy. I'm going to go ahead and leave the thermostat because I replaced this, had to have been like 1,000 or 2,000 miles ago, because I was dealing with some overheating issues, and then I just realized it was my radiator setup. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this as is. But if you guys have a stock, this is called the thermostat housing right here, this piece. It looks different. It looks like cast aluminum, and it comes out to about right here with this outer lip, and then it turns into a neck. The issue when you move over to this is a piece I got from AutoZone. is that this flange is now a stamped piece of metal instead of a cast piece of aluminum. So what that means is that it's a lot thinner, and so these bolts that go through don't need to be as long because they don't have to go through a bunch of cast aluminum up here. And the biggest issue that I had was that one in the back there. It actually runs into the neck behind it. And I didn't realize that when I first replaced this, and I actually ended up stripping a lot of threads on that back one there. So I may end up helicoiling that since I've got everything apart. I've got plenty of clearance to it right here because it probably could use a new set of threads. But I'm not having any issues with it right now, so I might just leave it alone and pray that it is good for another, 20,000 miles or whatever before I end up rebuilding this again. Yeah, this is the stud I was saying that you might want to replace. You can see mine is in really good condition. If yours is super rusty, you can see there's a little bit of corrosion back there on mine. You may want to go ahead and get a new one. These are threaded into the block, but you're going to need a stud puller or some method to get it out. So spraying some PB Blaster on it and then double nutting the front so that you can turn it out may be a good option. Otherwise, you really just want to make sure you don't accidentally snap off the threads into the block. So, yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and replace the water pump real quick, and then I may or may not replace that seal. We'll see. And we'll get everything going back together. Alright guys, I got the water pump off. You can see right there, it's still draining quite a bit of coolant out of here. So do be aware you're probably going to have some coolant leaking out. Just so you guys know, coolant is actually pretty bad for timing belts and just belts in general. You want to make sure to do this when you have either the old belt on or when your belt is off, obviously like I have, just because you want to preserve the length and life of your belt as much as you can. So I went ahead and already scraped up the surface here with a razor blade just to get it nice and clean. I might hit it just real quick with like a scotch pad, something to get any tiny little bit stuff off, just like little bits that I see on here off. And then also before you take it off, you want to make sure your part's gonna fit. I pulled this out, it looks right. And then of course it comes with a new gasket as well as the little studs for the water pump. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of clean this up real quick, put everything back together. If you guys really wanted to flush your coolant, over here on the side of your block, right here, this guy, if you undo that valve, it's an actual valve, and then there's like a little spout out the bottom here. That will help drain the block of coolant. So if you wanted to get as much as you can out in a controlled manner, that is a great way to do it. Otherwise, just take this off and let it just spill everywhere. Works just as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean that up, and we'll move on from there. Alright guys, as you can see, we got the new water pump on. It's looking really good. I love the zinc plated studs on here. They look really nice compared to just the standard, like, I don't know if those are stainless steel or aluminum or something. But this is looking really nice. We're going to go ahead and torque these bolts down. These go to 12 to 15 foot-pounds. Guys, for this whole job, there is an entire write-up on xenonzcar.com, and it's got a bunch of information, all the parts, all of the part numbers from Nissan that you need, and as well as all these torque values. So if you guys want to go ahead and check that out, that's a really good help as well. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to separate the standoff from the back of that cover here so we can torque it down on this guy. It looks easy enough as just holding this part here and then unscrewing the front. I'll let you guys know how that goes. I'm pretty sure it's a standoff. But if not, we'll just go ahead and torque that one down later. I'm gonna probably not do the seal on this. It looks good. It looks like it's not leaking, so I'm not gonna mess it up and hurt it at all. But we'll go ahead and start putting the timing belt on just after I torque these. Alright guys, we got everything back together for the water pump. Everything's torqued down. I went ahead and turned my attention to the crank pulley now. Like I was saying earlier, guys, you can buy these new. There's really no reason not to get all of this new. I just didn't. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is, I did it already, I grabbed some anti-seize, and I just put a very thin coat on the inside. I don't even know if you guys can see it. Just a very thin layer. And then go ahead and put this other guy on first. Don't roll off. Oops, almost dropped him. There we go. So this guy is in fact notched, but there's nothing on here, so it doesn't matter. This is, of course, want to go the right direction. like we were talking about earlier. So scoot that guy back on there. Alright, you can see we got the back plate on there. This actually spins very easily once it's on the back. It's on a different level. Now we'll grab the crank sprocket. Of course, the mark goes towards the front, and we will line up the woodruff key position. Slide it on there all the way to the back, and then I'll line it up. Then we will grab our woodruff key and stick it in here, just like that. If you need to hammer it and tap it just a little bit, it's not too big of an issue to do that. Perfect, looking good. Now we'll grab the front plate. Of course, we got to put this the right direction. So we're going to go ahead and put the new belt on. I'll grab the tensioner real quick and we'll put the tensioner on, and then we can get our new belt. Alright guys, got the new tensioner over here. I put the spring on. It does go ahead and the short end goes in that little hole right there. Now we're going to go ahead and take it. Oops, forgot the hardware was still on here. Take these off real quick. Alright, we're going to put it on like this, and then we're going to grab our Allen key, grab it, and we're going to take it, we're going to twist it against the spring, and then back like there. And I can't do this with one hand, but basically this is tensioning the spring, and then it's going to loosen. This is the furthest away from the belt. It's going to loosen like that. We'll go ahead and tighten that down real quick, and then put the belt on. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, you can see I've got it tightened down so it is holding itself. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our new belt. Your belt will look, you know, pretty much the same. It's got lines on it right here. So a line back there, a line over here, and then sometimes it'll say front like this, but if not, the typical rule of thumb is you just want the text facing forward. So we'll take it like this, and I can't do this with two hands, but there's a line right there. It was dotted right there, a solid line right there, and then a solid line on the bottom. I think the two solids are going to be the cams, and the dotted is going to be the crank. So we will go ahead, and I'm going to put this on with two hands, and we'll take a look at it from there. Alright guys, I was mistaken. It is solid line here, solid line down there, dotted line here. The way I figured it out was because I put the two solid lines up and there was a lot of slack between them, so I counted the teeth and there were 43 between the two solid lines. So remember, 40 teeth between here, 43 between there. So you can see the dotted line here lines up with our mark. The dotted line should be between two teeth, or the lines should be between two teeth right there. And same on the bottom, it might be a little harder to see. Looks like that, and it's lined up. So I've got it on just kind of halfway. It's kind of the easiest way to do it. It's just to put each one on a little bit and then slide it all backwards kind of slowly at the same time. It is just a little bit difficult, but it will go eventually. So I'm going to put this on fully and we'll be right back. Alright, you can see I got the belt on all of these fully. What we're going to go ahead and do real quick is count the teeth. 40 between these two, 43 between these, and then we'll go ahead and set the tensioner. So I've already counted. What we're going to go ahead and do for this tensioner, it's a 14 millimeter. Grab this guy. We're going to loosen it up and it should kind of snap for us. So you can see it kind of rotated forward like that. Now I want you guys to remember that the spring on here is not the tension spring. It's not meant to tension it, and it is not made to fail-safe it, if that makes sense. It is really just there as a courtesy, so you can loosen and then tighten. What we're going to go ahead and do is kind of tighten it up, and then just loosen it a little bit. What we're actually going to do is tighten this up, and then turn this over so that all of the slack will come to this side, and then we'll revisit the tension. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, and we'll be right back. Alright guys, so I went ahead and rotated it just like last time with the little stack up there of a socket and then the bolt. Now it is looking really good. One thing to remember, you can see this guy is supposed to be at TDC, and the line is right there. It's supposed to be at TDC, and you can't tell, but the line's down here. These lines will pretty much never line up again for a couple thousand revolutions, so as long as you do it right the first time, you count the teeth, you should be good to go. No need to worry about those lines lining up. Those are just to set it for the first time. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is check the tension. So we're going to grab this, and you want to kind of easily be able to turn it almost 90 degrees. So this is a bit tight. It's getting a bit tight right there. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this up. We'll spin it a little bit more and then check again. I'm sure the Xenon Z-Car write-up has a little bit more of a technical way of explaining exactly how much tension to put on here. But basically, if it's too much and you turn the car on, it'll kind of like whine. It'll almost sound like a supercharger. And if you have that, it is too much tension. So we don't want to do this. Obviously, if it's too loose, you can actually have it slip on the belts. But of course, too much tension will actually cause your cams to wear out their bearings because it's pulling them together. So you want to go ahead and make sure it is a decent tension right in the middle, not too loose, not too tight. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of tension this to where it should be, and I'll show you guys the final results. Alright guys, got it all tensioned up. It did take a couple back and forth tries, kind of going a little bit too tight, a little bit too loose. But now, as you can see, when I kind of pull this down, it kind of gets to the bottom of that groove back behind it, and then it kind of stops. And when I twist it, you know, I can twist it almost full 90 degrees with a little bit of force, you know. So this right here, I think, is a pretty good tension. Again, this isn't very scientific. There is an actual force measurement. You know, it's like with, you know, X pounds of force it needs to move, you know, a quarter inch or whatever. You can find that in the factory service manual. I believe a Haynes manual will have it as well. So if you want to go ahead and check one of those two. I don't have anything to measure force with, so I kind of just go by feel. But if you're curious, you can always buy one of those like scales that you pull with, or another kind of timing belt tensioner. I'm sure there's a tool for it online. But regardless, guys, now that we got the tension sets, we're going to go ahead and torque this down because it is at the right spot, and then we're pretty much done. So I'm going to go ahead and torque that down, and we'll go over final remarks. Alright guys, so we got everything torqued down, except for the crank, of course. That is going to be one of the last things that we do. We need to put on the cover and harmonic balancer before we can torque that down. But I'm going to go ahead and leave you here, because I'm actually going to go ahead and redo a few things on here, just to change colors, etc., etc. I'm going to redo that elbow in the back there, and you guys don't necessarily need to see that. So I want to go ahead and give you a few closing remarks. If you are going to pull off the cams, which I'm going to because I have to paint that piece, I might make that in my next update video. I'll include that in case you guys are curious. I think it's going to be week 12 of the final build process. You guys will see me doing that. But if you're going to do it, I highly recommend getting a crank or a cam gear holder tool. Basically, it grabs onto the teeth and the gear itself, and then it has a little opening right here, so you can put a socket on, undo and tighten the bolt while holding the gear in place. That is one of those things that is very important to make sure that it is held and doesn't snap forward or backwards all the time. That can be pretty dangerous for valves and pistons. So holding that with a tool is much easier than trying to hold it with like an old belt or something. I've tried that, and I didn't work out too well for me. But if you guys are going to take those off, the camshafts are going to be torqued to 58 to 65 foot-pounds. So I'm grabbing all of these from Xenon Z-Car. It's a great write-up, guys. I really recommend you going and reading just for any extra information that they have that I might have missed. And then other than that, guys, the tensioner is torqued down to 32 to 43 foot-pounds. So nothing too crazy. Just put a torque wrench on there. And then, of course, the crankshaft is going to be 90 to 98 foot-pounds of torque. And then I think they do recommend putting a little bit of Loctite on there as well. So overall, guys, this is not a hard process. I think there's a lot of caution and people being scared around this, just because it is a very important part of this car. It is an interference engine. You don't want to get it wrong. But as long as you cross your T's, dot your I's, check, make sure that there's 40 and 43 teeth between the gears, you're going to be fine. There's not going to be any issues with it. It's a very straightforward process. You just want to make sure that you get it done correctly. So, as always, guys, if you have any questions, definitely drop a comment down below. I'll do my absolute best to answer them. As well, there should be a lot more resources for this online. Xenon Z-Car, of course, like I've mentioned, has a great write-up. I think other people have done videos on this as well. So don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask. The Facebook groups are always a great place to ask for information and search for information. But yeah, that's what I'm going to say, guys. Let me know if you have any questions or comments on this video. I hope it helped, and I will see you guys next time.